As you might have already seen, the 1920s are about to be upon us again. Or I should say the 20s, because this is the 2020 version. And so it occurs to me that many of you are probably looking for a nice 20s inspired costume for this 2020 New Year's Eve. This is the extended how-to version where I take you through explaining each step so you can create your own 1920s refashion, more sustainable, more authentic, from just scarves you can find at the thrift store. So let me take you back to the beginning and show you how I actually created this, but better yet, how you can actually create one for yourself. Welcome back, my lovely ladies and gents. I've been asked quite a lot actually on what to wear for a 1920s party that actually looks 1920s, because I do not want to see anybody buying those horrible, unethically made, environmentally horrible, plastic, cheap 1920s flapper Gatsby horrible costumes that you see that actually have nothing to do with the 1920s whatsoever. I don't want to see anybody doing that when it is so easy to make a beautiful 1920s dress from things that we find at the thrift store. So there are a few little notes for this video. One, this is not how to make a historically 100% accurate piece of 1920s dress. No. I am not a fashion historian, I am merely an enthusiast. So if you're planning to do this for a reenactment or events where it has to be 100% authentic, this is not that. This is going to be 1000% more authentic looking than any of those cheap, nasty costumes that we just talked about. But the idea is to make it the most authentic looking and feeling and well-made garment we can, out of using materials that we can already find and at the thrift store quite easily. So that is our aim. Let's talk about the inspiration. This dress is actually being constructed for a refashion runway parade that I'm doing for Worn Out. There is a whole series of videos about that. I will link them all below. So I was really inspired by the 1920s beaded tabard style dresses. And I think it just really epitomizes classic beautiful beaded 1920s evening wear, because that's what I think of what comes to mind when I think 20s and party dress. You want beaded evening wear, right? That's what we're going for. I'll go over this in detail, but the basic idea is some fancy beaded lace scarf, something like that. This is the fancy outer tabard. Just going to find one super long, we'll get to that, so it can basically go on as our outer top dress, and then at the sides will just kind of be strung together. And then we're going to make a really simple 1920s style slip dress, which is just a rectangle with shoestring straps. Now this is not intended as a step-by-step tutorial. I'm going to show you what I'm doing for mine here, but I will add in a lot of recommendations for you to think about for your own, to give you inspiration and kind of the guide so that you can go and do your own. Let's talk this outer tabard first and get that done, and then I'm going to move on to the slip later on. So to get this beautiful looking tabard, what should you look for? So the first thing that you really want to look for is the fabric. So we want this to look authentic, right? So that means no super light, horrible looking polyester that's just really soft and floaty and has no weight to it. It's a dead giveaway that it's a synthetic and it's not accurate. It doesn't look right. Now, this is still polyester chiffon, but because this has a beaded trim on the bottom, look how much weight it gives this fabric. See how it just drops? That's a good thing. You want that real weighty drop. Even this one here is all polyester as well, but it does have a certain amount of weight to it with these added, whatever's in those purple bits, gives it quite a bit of weight. So it does have some drop and some heaviness that gives it a really nice feel. So this is a rayon chiffon, and again, so this isn't just like, it's not just floating off and bouncing. When I do this, like, it drops down. It's hard to explain if you don't know what I mean, I'm sorry, but something with some weight to it is going to make it look a lot more authentic. Weight in the fabric, so think You know, rayons are really good for this that you might find in scarves, or something with beaded lace to make it heavy at the bottom to give it that real heaviness and bounce. Then of course you're looking for decoration. So the beading is really good because I'm going for evening wear, you're probably going for evening wear. So something sparkly, where are they all? I happen to find black, lots of sparkly, some more beads, even this one with this like little frill. So something decorative, because these are all decorative, mostly beaded and lace. Even like a rectangle length of fabric will work, of course. This is all this is, right? This is why a scarf is because it's already pre-edged and it's just going to make it that bit more easy for you. So all we're going to construct first is a rectangle. So pick your rectangle basically. The other thing that we really need to look at is the length and the width. I've just folded it over because basically that will then be back and front of the scarf like this. We're going to cut a hole in the very top. So this fold will end up being the shoulder seams. So you need to hold it right here. And then, let's have a look. Okay, it's really hard, but that is on my knee. That is way too short, okay? One of the dead giveaways and one of the things that most people get wrong with the 1920s is skirts. They thought short dresses, short for the time. There was no knees whatsoever, ever. So it must go below your knees, even the middle of your calves. That is a good 1920s length. Even this one here, so you can see there's no way that that is long enough, but this is the one that I'm going to use. Why? Because we're just going to make it a longer rectangle. If I hold it down here, it's at a really nice length. We're just going to add another piece to our rectangle, so be it another scarf in the same black chiffon, say, or maybe you have contrast colors and you found a contrast block to put on the top. So you'll probably find a scarf about a little bit too short, just like mine, but you'll need another section of fabric to either make it longer up the top or longer at the bottom as well. So bear that in mind. And the width needs to be, well, just kind of wide enough so it kind of fits around your body. If it's a little bit in the middle, that's okay too, because you see them quite often, they're little strips. But don't make them too little. This is not wide enough. It's too skinny. It's like a stripe of fabric rather than a dress that's open at the sides. So you do want it to cover most of your body all the way around for width. Okay, something I should add. Fringing like this really actually wasn't a thing really in the 20s, so I would actually save this for a different project, or you know, if you want to maybe only loosely inspired, then maybe go for it, but otherwise stay away from fringing, and neither of these are actually wide enough to fit me all the way. But remember, you could use this for the centerpiece, then you could also make it wider by extending, like having strips down each side of it if you find something nice like this. So this is the scarf that I will be using. I have this beautiful beaded trim on this end and it's just chiffon. I have this folded over at the moment so you can see how short it is. Right, not even nearly long enough. So you could maybe find a beautiful beaded trim just like this. And you might be able to lengthen yours at the bottom, or with a contrast piece. You might like to color block and add a panel at the bottom, or add a panel, a contrast maybe up the top, or always keep it easy and stick to the same colors. You know, all black will be pretty easy, or stick to the same like plain colors rather than prints is a really good idea too, for evening wear in particular for the 1920s. Just scour Pinterest and look at original 1920s dresses and images, and just scour and study them. I'll link my Pinterest below too if you want to have a look. So I need to make it a little bit bigger so I get enough length. How am I going to do this? I'm going to use this second scarf, and now if you find two the same width, that would be awesome, but these are not the same width. So I'm going to use this one this way. So that means this edge of the scarf is actually finished still. So I'll need to cut along here. I'll need to finish this edge, join this to here. This should be enough as it is, and then I'm going to join the other half here of that over on this side up here. Does that make sense? And then through the sides here, I'll just need to finish these edges of this insert panel on these edges to match the nice edges of the scarf down there. Yeah? So basically extend your scarf, your rectangle length, either from the top or from the bottom, and just make one really long rectangle. That's all we're doing here. Start by laying your secondary piece down super duper flat. Add hem allowance. You can be really sneaky and actually pull one single yarn from the scarf. It'll give you a nice straight line to use as a cut line. It will go straight across the grain. But don't forget to add extra hem allowance and do either side the same. And now make sure you cut your main piece in half the same. You can use the sneaky method of pulling out the single yarn to get a nice straight line as well. But if you're brand new, don't worry about it. Now fold these out, lay these right sides together, and first of all we're going to seam up the pieces all together, and then we will hem those edges afterwards. Now you do need to finish your seams, so you need to cover the raw edges somehow so they don't fray. I'm covering mine with a velvet trim so I can decorate it and finish those seams at the same time. You choose what suits you in your skill level. I'm going to hem my edges by simply folding over twice and giving it a nice hand stitch to give it a nice soft, loose feel to it when it's done. Stitching these hems by machine will be a lot quicker, so you might want to do that. So I have successfully now just made a larger rectangle piece. That's it. What do we do now? And I won't lie, the next part of actually cutting out and finishing the neck hole, basically, is going to be the hardest part of this whole project. But it is something that you can do to your skill level, so don't stress about it. If you want to try the same thing, I'll give you a few suggestions as we go. Now in the middle of this new panel piece is basically my shoulder line, sort of right in the middle, and that is half of the garment either side, right in the middle. So to make this easy on myself, I just want to actually run a white basting thread right along that fold line. You can use chalk or anything else if you don't want to baste. So I marked in my shoulder line here so I could see it, because that will be right along the top of my shoulders, half of the garment. Now if you look at any of your clothes, you'll know that the front and the back necklines do not open the same. So you'll always want more of the open neckline at the front and less at the back, usually. Which is why I suggest using a garment you already have to copy the neckline. So for instance, a few things to consider first are perhaps where your extension line is. You probably don't want your neckline to come down into that seam, because then you'll just open it up. I mean, you just need to think about it. Or if you have other beading or things happening through here, have a think about what you might be cutting into and where might suit where might suit your neckline to come to. So for me, I probably don't want my neckline to come down past this here. I think it would sit nicely, you know, maybe about here. I think something a little higher. And so you can do round, V-neck. It's quite often in the 20s you see the outer dress like this scooping down, and then you actually see the slip through underneath at the top. It's quite a nice look, but again, just think about where your seam is, what you've got going there, what looks good. I leave that up to you. So I want mine to be quite high. This is really quite wide, this neckline. I want mine to be, say, tighter closer to my neck and maybe a fraction lower. So, I mean, I can still use that, but I think this one, so you can see this one's much closer to my neckline, so it's a better start, comes down lower, it's V'd, but I'm going to scoop it out. I think I'm going to start with this one as my guide. So back and front are not the same. So we do, however, though, want this side the same as this side. You don't want to get it wonky, and that can be one of the trickiest parts. So instead of sort of folding this like this and cutting it, we'll actually be folding it like this. So you've got both of the backs together, both of the fronts together, and cutting it like this. Let me show you. Instead of folding this long ways, I'm actually going to fold it halfways. So we get a long, thin strip, 2 shoulder points together, make sure everything is matching, and pin all this in place so everything is aligned. Line up shoulder seams of your sample garment to shoulder seam of your tabard dress. Make sure you get the front and the back correct. You may have a little bit of extra through here because it is a different shape. Remember, ours is a flat garment, whereas this has a shaped seam. So don't worry if it's a little bit out. And then we can use this as the basis to start getting a neckline. Do remember that you will need to add seam allowance if you're going to need a seam, because we need to finish this in some way, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But for now, I'm just going to create the shape. So before we go any further, I need to think about how I'm going to finish this neckline edge, as should you, because it will depend on then how much seam allowance I add onto this neckline shape that I've got. So this is where you really need to sew to your skill level. So you could finish it with a bias binding or a bias facing. Remembering this is a round curved neckline. It's going to be pretty tricky to sew, and the fabric is probably going to fray, and it could be slippery like chiffon. So bear that in mind. You could also use, maybe you have some lace on the bottom that you used, and you could actually trim around the edge with that same lace as well. That could be a nice finish. Even think about different like jewelry. This is a big beaded necklace that I found at the thrift store. Perhaps something like that could even, I mean, it wouldn't go the whole way, but something like that could finish off your neckline edge as well. You could use ribbon, but you cannot use a straight ribbon. Why? Let me show you. This neckline edge is curved. It's going to be quite curvy. A straight piece of ribbon goes straight. When you try and curve this around, see how it puckers and it bubbles, and it's not going to work. So do not try and use a straight piece of ribbon to cover this. That's where you need a bias binding, like a bias tape. Use it as a binding or a facing, because it will curve and mold around the neckline edge. You could just maybe roll it over twice carefully with your hands and maybe hand stitch it down too. That could work, and cover it with something. So I'm going to let you decide what works for you, but there are some suggestions for you, and just keep it in line with your skill level. Now, what am I going to do? I definitely may regret this, but I'm going to cut out some bias strips out of the leftover chiffon that I cut up from the center piece of the scarf that I used for the neckline piece. Cut some bias strips and try and make it bias facing out of the chiffon. As soon as you cut your neckline open, make sure you stay stitch it, you baste it, you do something to hold that shape, because it is going to stretch out completely. Make sure you cut it smaller rather than too big, because you can always make it bigger, but you can't go back. So just a few wise words for you. It's looking so good. This, the weight of this at the bottom is really giving it that sort of heavy drop, which I think really feels nice, and it adds to the feel of it. So all I really need to do to this tabard dress now is remove my basting stitches, of course, and then add some ties at the side. Something really easy, of course, is to just do some ribbon ties. I'm actually going to use the same velvet trim that I've used across here. It needs something holding this. So what I'm going to do is use the velvet ribbon that comes across and do a little join, probably so it's open about, say, that big, and it will close on one side with a hook and eye, because it needs to come off to get on and off. So there'll just be a little strand in here holding that sort of down, and so you don't get that. Then at the hips, I played around, maybe some buckles. Probably you could even just put a brooch or something like that. Put these little lovely little floral flowers that I have, I think actually match as well. Although I don't see this on tabard dresses that I haven't really seen, but they have lots of like hip flowers happening in the 1920s, and I think that it still will suit the look pretty nicely. So I'm going to sit those sort of just below the waist, hip line. Keep your options open too if you need to, but just remember it needs to come on and off. So do a nice little ribbon tie for something really easy. Some strings of beads would be even more perfection, which I probably would do if I had more time. And then once they're on, this is finished. And then of course, There's the slip, I definitely think that you should keep your slip underneath really simple as well. You can probably find one pretty easily. All you really want is a rectangle with shoestring straps straight across at the front is really what you're looking for. So it should not be stretchy at all. No way at all should it be stretchy. It should not be tight that you see your body. It should be loose, baggy. If it feels frumpy, too long, too baggy, that's a good sign. You're probably on the right track. I found this dress. It just has a seam here and is just gathered. This is something that you could probably find at the thrift store. I had intended to just take this seam apart here. Basically then add like, you can use a straight piece of ribbon and then use the same ribbon as straps. Easy peasy. But I don't want all black. I am going to do the same thing with this scarf yet again. Just think a rectangle straight across the top with straps is all you need. That's all you need. We just need to create side seams. So sew your side seams as you wish. And then we need to cut open that top edge along the fold. And then along that top edge, we're going to create a casing. Let's pretend that this is my top edge and I'll show you how to create a casing. First up, fold over 1 centimeter on that top edge and press. And then fold it over again, just a few millimeters only larger than your actual ribbon that you're going to insert into this later, and press it nice and flat. Now we are going to create little buttonholes in only the top layer, so only one layer. The other layer you won't see anything from the other side. So just make buttonholes on your machine and slice them open. Then what we're going to do is stitch along this edge and stitch it all down into place. Hook in a safety pin towards the ribbon and actually thread this through the casing all the way around the top edge until it comes out the other side. Then you should be able to pull it, and this is how it gathers and creates shape and then fits your body. You can just tie a little bow, make it look pretty. Only one side has this bow, so you could either choose this to be on the inside or the outside, whatever you decide. Then using the same ribbon, cut some pieces and actually just pin them onto your dress so you can get them in the right place. And of course, try it on to make sure. I've just tied mine up at the top, make it really easy. But when you sew the straps on, you do not want to catch the ribbon that is holding your top edge together. You want to be able to move it. Only stitch the strap on top of the stitching that is already there and then close up the top. Hem it up if you need to and do the hand finishes on the sides and you're done. If you're going to try this yourself and you're trying to achieve a more authentic sort of 2020s look of what you can, here are some pointers. You can curl your hair, but keep it short. Pretty much everyone was exclusively bobbed hair in the 1920s. Don't accentuate the bust. Actually, the flatter, the better. So no push-up bras, no extra cup. Actually, flat is best. Long skirt length. There is absolutely no knees whatsoever. I know you think short dresses, but short means showing ankles. And unfortunately, no big, thick pin-up eyebrows. Probably try and keep them as thin as possible, and no stilettos. I'm sorry. Try and keep those heels low and thick and chunky. It'll give you a bit more of a authentic, realistic 1920s look. Since I have actually filmed this originally, I have some fantastic news for those of you wanting to get into sewing and learn a bit more, especially about refashioning, and that is I have opened up Vintage Sewing School. So it's a place where you can go and we can hang out every month with new lessons on learning to sew, refashion, mending. It's a little bit different than regular sewing classes. So go have a look. It's vintagesewingschool.com and let me know if you're interested. We can hang out every month and sew together. If you try it yourself, use the hashtag garment renovation and tag me because I really want to see your own creations. I love it so, so much. Leave me your comments below on how you enjoyed it. Remember to share it. If you know someone who's going to a 2020s party and they can make something made entirely of scarves. How easy, right? Thank you again, and until next time, bye.